Yeah. So it's, what is this? October 2nd, 3rd?
Third.
3rd. Thank
Crazy.
you. I've kind of lost track. And we got a full house tonight. So Adam, I'm gonna let you take it away. I'm gonna let you guys drive the car tonight.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the group. Thanks, David, for hosting and recording and doing editing and uploading them all to the group. And so if this is the first time you've been, I don't think anyone's a first timer here tonight.
Oh, I see some Paul Anderson looks
Paul
new.
Anderson. Okay,
Yeah.
Paul Anderson. If you take a word, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell us your history and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm over in the Pittsburgh area, so it's kind of late over here. I won't be staying for the whole meeting. And let's see, bought the ZX81 way back, and when it was just new, and then several years after that, I got the 2068. Didn't really do much, but I just really was intrigued by the whole thing that Clive Sinclair came up with, the basic and the keywords. I always thought it was just cool, and moved across the country several times, but brought all the stuff with me. And, you know, it was just, I happened to run across this. So I was looking for something else like the IBM Pro Printer 2, because I had that for a while and then that went bad. And then I happened to find you guys. I'm like, okay. And I saw the emails. I'm like, wow, you guys were way into the code and whatnot. I tried to do that and I got lost. So
When you say you found us, Paul, you found us via YouTube, or how did you find us, or David's website?
well, let's see, what was it, David? Could have been David's website. I think there was, you know, because I was on eBay looking for something and it might have shown up, or I was doing a search.
Oh, it's not a quiz. It's okay.
Yeah, it was just something like that, but not on YouTube. But it was
Okay.
the website first. Then I found the YouTube stuff. I'm like, so I started listening in on some of the recordings. Like, wow, you guys are like so into this, and I think it's so cool. I am such an amateur.
Well, thank you for joining us. Do you have any, and you still have your hardware, you said?
Oh, yeah.
Is it hooked up by chance?
It is not hooked up.
Okay.
In the process of fixing up one of the basement areas. So I'm going to be setting it up then.
Well, good luck to getting it all going, and maybe you can try some of the hardware, or not hardware, but software that's on David's site, because he's got a lot of good stuff archived.
Right. And so all that. So yes, I bought out someone's stuff and it's been lugged across the country. So I'm not sure how much is still working or whatever. Tried to watch all the ESD. So it's like, yeah, we're going to be setting it up and then find out what works and what doesn't.
All right.
Very cool, Paul. Hey, Paul, I'm up in Buffalo.
Ah,
so
okay.
I'll be here all night.
I won't. I'm not retired yet. I have school tomorrow.
Yeah, I gotta work. Cool.
All right.
Well, great for joining us, Paul.
So let's see. I know we have a couple of people who have some projects they're working on. I know Tim just today, I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday. I read it today. Posted about his interface for his printer that he finally put together and got all the parts and pieces. I don't know if we want to jump in there, or if there's something else we need to talk about first, David. Or
no, that was really exciting. I'd love to hear from Tim about that.
All right. Why don't you give us some background for people who've never been here before, or just watching this video in the future, and then catch us up and tell us what's going on.
Over to me.
Yeah.
Cool. So just, over to the weather. Yeah, so what it was is I got a couple of old ZX, well, I got couple of old ZX printers and a TS2040, and some bit of discussion about trying to get it to print from a modern microcontroller and just all things printer. I want to be able to print to it from Windows. I want to be able to emulate it at some stage so that we can plug something in and print from old computers to like a web page or something. So this is just part of a bigger process. And so fresh off the boat is a little shield that has a ZX81/TS2068 edge connector on it, plugs into an Arduino, and you can print to it. 9-volt power supply in case you're using the old ZX printer. And yeah, and It's the old ZX printer. I picked the TS 2040 up. It's much bigger. And yeah, there you go. It works. There's like one component, just a resistor, and this is just like the prototype. I'll tidy the board up and put some writing on it and stuff, and I'll make that public. The code's public on GitHub. Basically, then let you figure out
what's the barrel jack for? The coax jack power?
Yeah, 9-volt power for the ZX printer.
Okay.
This guy needs 9 volts to do
Right.
his work, and so it's like 9 volts center positive. Not old school.
Right. Theoretically, could
yeah,
we
so-
put the 24 volts that the 2040 wants?
It doesn't get it
2040
from the bus.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
plugs straight into the 2040. So
Yeah. It
Oh, I'm
doesn't-
sorry. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
as I wrestle it over, yeah. So it's got the
That's, yes.
plug directly. So it doesn't actually use the 9 volts at all. So if you're not got a ZX printer, then just don't put that on and don't plug it in. So
And
Same-
how many
same
did you just populate enough fingers for the printer?
yeah, there's only like there's not enough pins on this plugs into an Uno, just
An
the
Uno.
original.
Okay.
And so it doesn't have enough pins really to do all the bus, but only needed the 2 address lines and the data, a couple of
Yeah,
control signals.
Yeah.
So yeah, the I'll get back to doing the printing from Windows thing, so that then I don't know we'll be able to print to this from Windows. It might have to do that on the Mega, but in any case, whatever it ends up being.
I know a few people were asking, for boards. I don't know if you have boards up on your GitHub, but where they could, send out and have them made themselves.
Yeah, so this was just like I just grabbed someone's shield footprint and I grabbed someone's barrel jack, and I just didn't know whether it was going to work. Now I know it all works. I'll tweak the silk screen and tidy it all up and straighten a few of the tracks out that looked a bit ugly, and I'll publish the Gerbers and maybe put a public whatever the easy EDA public thing is. So yeah, 100%, yes. So
Yeah,
code's up,
yeah,
and
very
then
cool.
the hardware to follow.
Just so I make sure I understand, the Gerbers are the files you send off to a manufacturing company. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just all the different where to drill the holes and all the different layers. So yeah.
I
Yeah,
hope
but he'll-
I hope you realize, Tim, you're going to make Stuart a millionaire from this.
Too bad Stuart's not here tonight.
Stuart reach out to me after the last thing, and we've been having a bit of back and forward. So yeah, we're collaborating on it.
Awesome.
Another thing, Adam, he's going to put a link to. I know, like all the PCB houses, you can make your design public, right? So then you can just click on you can search their public PCB links, and then you can find Tim's, and you can just order it straight from there. So you don't have to upload to Gerbers and go through all the
Oh,
all
okay.
the So you can just basically, hey, here's a public file that somebody's made. I want some of those. Click on it, and how many do you want? Pay it, and then then there you go.
Very
Yeah.
neat.
David's got a few designs up there of publicly available.
Yeah.
I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, I like that tool.
That should work with the AlphaCom printer too, then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I have
'Cause
one of
it's-
those kicking around here somewhere. I gotta find it.
That's just a rebadged printer, right? It's just a rebadged AlphaCom.
The 2040?
Yeah,
Yeah. Alphacom was the original manufacturer.
yeah. That's what I
Yeah,
thought.
I didn't know if it had a different ROM or character ROM or something like that in it.
It's a little. I mean, they're not identical. Obviously, if you had two of them, next to each other, there's some differences, but pretty much they're the same basic guts.
Very
They're,
cool.
they're
Tim.
all they're all bitmap. So the font that you saw on those examples is just something I had sitting around. So you can print whatever
Okay.
you like to them.
Oh, good load different fonts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should actually put a Timex Sinclair font on it. It's just an arbitrary 5x7 font instead of the 8x8s of the Sinclair stuff.
Well, but that's where Ryan can come in.
Wow, you took the words right out of my mouth. All right, talk about segue. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Hi. Yeah, can
Hey.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So let me give some background about Ryan real quick. So Ryan is local to me, and he was over here on Thursday afternoon and evening. So we got together, and Ryan was showing me his program, his quick font. And why don't you take it away from there, Ryan?
Oh, well, what were you doing? Just an update on things?
Yeah, and well, I
Um,
guess the group doesn't know, but you sent me privately an updated version that also runs separately under OS 64.
yeah, well, when I was over there with Adam, he had the OS 64 ROM, and so we plugged it in and loaded up the program to see how terrible it was under OS 64, and it was pretty hilarious. But I knew what was wrong because clearly the font pointer is different under that ROM, and so I
Right,
made some
when it came up,
adjustments.
the font was just totally garbled. In fact, I took a picture of it. I meant to share it with the group, but I wasn't sure if Ryan wanted me to do that, so I didn't.
Oh
But
no, that's fine.
I'll do that later tomorrow or something.
The problem was I didn't expect that the ROM font is in a different place for whatever reason.
Also, it's not like OS 64 is really, well documented.
Well, that just means that it's probably even less likely to run some other software because the ROM seems to be rearranged a little bit. But then again, it's targeted for 2068, which already was incompatible with things. So I guess making it
Oh, true enough.
more, rearranging the ROM again probably didn't really affect anything practically. But basically just
And also
changing.
Stuart said last week that they only sold like 50 of them. So it's not like the number of people out there clamoring for the software is, but it's,
Yeah, so but basically just looking at the pointers more carefully than assuming that the ROM font's always in the same place. Then put it to rights, but then you're dealing with the way that it has the graphics are still on, even though it's a high res, the graphics are still on a 256 pixel grid, even though there's 512 pixels. So all the plotting was in the correct place, but then the text is all off to one side because it's half as wide. And so it just became kind of a little challenge to say, okay, I want to make it look good under OS 64, even though no one cares but me. And
nope, me too.
it is really cool to see too. Yeah.
But so it was just sort of an exercise, one of those little challenges is like, okay, I'm going to make this work. And I found on Dave's site the doc file, I guess it is, put it in the emulator, started beating on it, mostly just moving things around. And then you have the odd limitations of, you've got, it's basically monochrome, but you get to pick, your white and black color. You get to pick your background, and then the foreground is contrasting. And so you can't set all the foreground background colors. And you don't get flash, but you do get inverse. So I guess flash must have been implemented in the video hardware, looking at the attributes or something like that. Whereas inverse is done, I guess, on the fly when it writes to the screen, right? So not having attributes, inverse is sort of, you can still have that. And so basically just adjusted it so it looked nice and spread out and a little more room for a few things. And so that was good. And then I kind of reasoned, well, hey, maybe in this, with this extra compressed font, maybe you would like to design a font that might look a little better. Although maybe challenge to Adam is to just use it to make a font that looks good on the CRT.
I think that's not possible, honestly.
If at all, that may not be possible.
When I was playing around with your program today, Ryan, I was messing around with the different colors, and like you said, you only can get one background color, and then it automatically chooses your foreground color. I think
Yeah.
that's the way it works. And I tried, I think it was green, and it looked hard to read even on the RGB monitor for whatever reason. And it was 100%. Not only did it look unreadable on the CRT TV that I use, but it was like shimmering, like back and forth. It was like really ridiculous. And I don't know if it's the color like that does that, or it's my computer. I noticed the other day, or Ryan noticed, whenever my computer is showing green, even under regular basic, it kind of freaks out a little bit, and the picture kind of wobbles. I don't know.
Well,
Anyone
no,
knows?
it was your monitor. My reckoning was that the red channel showing red made it distort more. So anything with some red in it. And so remember, the green was actually more stable.
Well, not today. Promise you that. Not today.
Oh, well, but that could be, different, given that maybe this. Well, no, is the signal the signal is not different though, right?
That's
It's
David.
outputting.
David?
With the video signal? No, it's the same. What's the contrasting color for green, Adam?
Another color that I can't remember.
Okay. Okay.
I know if you do green and violet, like green paper and violet ink, you get some, you get the fringing,
Yep,
Yeah.
right?
absolutely.
You get the fringing, and you have to change the main crystal oscillator, the orange pot up by the SLD.
Yep.
If you tweak that, you can make the fringing really fast, so it kind of almost disappears, and you can actually slow it down where you can actually, you can see the lines going through it.
Oh, interesting.
You don't adjust your your RY or your the actual potentiometers down by the speaker. You got to adjust the crystal oscillator clock.
And
And
that's because the main crystal for the 2068 is 14.112 megahertz or something like that, and that's divided by 4, and you end up with a number that's close to but not quite the color burst frequency, which is 3.5 something.
Hey, David,
something.
I
Yes.
think this is how come Paul was saying he's going to leave early.
This is where Paul fell asleep.
He's like,
Yeah, I'd like to have a discussion with the 2068 hardware designer to find out just why they did that.
Yeah, what the F? Exactly.
I mean,
Would
every
that-
other computer on the market used a standard color burst frequency for their CPU clock, and
Well, and you know what? There's a color burst crystal inside, the little tank there, the little RF tank, right next to the modulator. Sorry, I just derailed the conversation. Ryan, let's go back to talking about your program.
So I guess then, for those not familiar, it's just a thing to help you edit a font that the the Spectrum and the 2068 had ability to have an alternate font. There's a system variable that points to where the font is. So you could make a font, load it into memory, and then point to it, and it would use it. But there's no automatically reserved space like with the user-defined graphics characters. So this just, well, of course, there's no editor for the user-defined graphic characters built in either. But so what this does is it reserves some memory for a font, which needs 768 bytes, and then moves the RAM top down with a clear statement to make that space, and then points to that font when it needs to, and then the editor lets you edit the bits of each character. So you select the character and you can go in and edit it, and then you can save the result as a code block to tape, and then you can load them to.
right, and it works quite well, actually.
Yeah, except right now I'm having some issue with, I just loaded it up in the emulator and it's gone wrong again.
Something I want to talk about with Ryan when he was here was really interesting. When he ran into the problem with OS 64 and the font not showing, he knew immediately what it was, and he started doing some pokes, and he's using real hardware, my TS 2068, and so I haven't really ever used it like him. I've never been programming in BASIC like live. You know, I type in programs, I type in some stuff from the books, but he was like kind of writing it and updating his program in front of me. And I haven't seen anyone do that, myself included, in quite a number of years. And I watching him get excited and knowing what the problem was almost right away, and fixing the problem right before my eyes, getting the font to display properly. It was pretty impressive. So kudos to you, Ryan.
Adam,
Well,
it sounds like you
thanks.
need to get a modem and then invite Ryan over and he can hack into the internet from your 2068.
And we can change my grades.
That's right.
A+.
So you said he loaded the program on your real 2068. What did you guys use to load the program?
What do you mean?
Did you use tape player or
No, a WAV file.
Okay.
A WAV
Okay.
file from
Yeah,
my laptop.
Oh,
Yeah. No tape players in this house.
Yeah,
Well, there
you know-
is,
you
but
know-
it's for my Astrocade. But
You know, Adam's so adamant about using real hardware, but when it comes to a cassette recorder, nope, that's apparently not going to use that.
that's not hardware. That's tape.
I think using a tape player is more a matter of self-abuse than it is hardware.
Yeah. Is there anyone here who like loads stuff from tape ever anymore?
well,
Yeah, Paul does.
Yeah, I
Well, I mean, that's because I really missed a huge gap of all of this hardware. And so right now, the only thing I have is the tape player. I had that ROM, Larkin.
Oh,
Okay.
the disk drive.
And it works sometimes, and then it was not working, and but yeah, for right now, I don't have any of the other fancy schmancy stuff, so that's what I'm interested in.
Oh,
cool. Very
good
cool.
luck, and make a video because I want to see it happen and work. A video that's working.
Okay.
And I my old Amstrad CPC has the tape deck built in. It's
Oh,
like
sure.
it's enormous. It's actually part of the keyboard.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of that. Was
Yeah,
that
I've
sold
got
down
a-
there, or you had to buy that elsewhere?
I was actually doing it commercially back in the 80s, and so when I saw one come up early this year, I got one. So yeah.
Wait,
Tim, how prevalent were the Sinclair machines down in the Australia, New Zealand area?
Yeah, quite a bit. The Amstrad and the Atari, the 400s and stuff were quite common. The Sinclairs were common, and then the Amstrad. So they were the main machines that I saw at the time.
Tim, you said
Yeah.
you were doing something commercially in the 80s?
Yeah, one of the guys was making commercials, ads, whatever, television ads, and he was using the Amstrad for doing the graphics for it. And so I was helping with doing some of the machine code to sort of speed it up. So yeah, a number of things were using that. It was a cheap option, and yeah. And so
wow.
there was a handful of other. There was a company here, Grandstand, that was the sort of agent for it, and we did some software for them. And strangely enough, Ryan Afonte did one of the. Not I didn't do that. Someone else did that. And then there was he typed all the instructions up in the editor on the Amstrad, and then of course the problem then was that when he shipped it to people, he wanted to be able to hit the print button, and we got permission from Grandstand to ship the editor with his code. And I did a little hack to it that changed the you could run it from a command line, and I did a little hack that changed it so the foreground and the background were both black, and so that way they couldn't use the editor, but they could hit type the command in. The screen would go black. It would do all the printing of his documentation, and then the program would exit. So as far as they were concerned, they weren't given a free editor, but that's how we did it.
That's a good
I
idea,
found this-
actually.
I found the set foreground command and then just put the 0 in there for those colors.
We got to get the Sinclair nomenclature. It's paper and ink.
Oh, sorry.
Paper and ink. And I have a Spectrum 2 Plus. I don't know, Spectrum 2 something, but it's the CPC basically too, right? But it's the Sinclair Spectrum that's inside with the tape recorder on the side of it,
Yeah,
built
Alan
into one chassis.
Yeah, Alan Sugar, who did that, he had this whole idea that he wanted truck drivers to be able to compute, and so the screen had to be just part of the system, and the key and the tape had to be part of the system. And he ended up buying out Sinclair because while he wasn't a technical person, he was a good salesman. And so when he did that, all that tech went over to the later versions of the Sinclair.
Yeah, I'd like to get a Sinclair 3 or a Spectrum 3 because it has the disk drive, right? The disk drive's in there built in, but haven't
but
found one yet.
It's a 3-inch disk drive though, right? Like literally, like
It's
not
an
3.5?
Amstrad. Yeah, I don't even know if it's a.
Yeah.
It's not a 3.5 inch.
It's
No.
3 inch.
3-inch, no. No.
You just,
And
yeah,
so
you
why
just
they-
fold a 5 1/4 in half, and it's about right.
Why
If
they
I'm
went
not
to the-
mistaken, though, that can't the 3-inch drives be replaced with a 3.5-inch drive?
Yeah.
I think. Okay.
Yeah. It's the same form. Well, I mean, the old
No,
3
it's
inches
not.
are kind of tall, but essentially it's the same form factor.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
and why he
replace it
went
with
for
a
the 3
GoTech,
inches
too.
is he got a whole lot of cheap ones through Japan or China at the time, and so that's why he got that format. It was a economical decision, not a technical one.
Who made those drives? Was it TIAC probably?
No, those
Uh,
are made by Hitachi.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got one sitting, 2 of them actually sitting in a little box.
And
Well, that's doing a lot
Amstrad-
of good.
The CPC is the same, and you flip them. You have A and a B side. You use
Right.
one side or the other, not double headed.
Oh, I didn't
Oh,
know
wow.
that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, so,
That was
so it
what was
acts
in-
more like a 5 1/4 inch then.
It behaves like a 5 1/4 inch, yes,
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting to know.
but it's deeper than it is wide.
So if it's like a 360K, you get 180 on each side. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it depends upon the formatting, but it's like I think the Zebra is about 160. The Timex Portugal, the FDD3 or 3000 is about 160 per side. And yeah, you flipped it up. I'll grab one.
Are the discs
Remember
available?
only the early 5 1/4s were actually single-sided. Most of them were double-sided or double-sided. So like the Commodore was single, but everything else after I think was double-sided.
Yeah, the Ataris were also single sided. Well, some of them were
Apple.
double later. But
The Apple was single-sided. That was 143K per
Wow,
side.
I don't know.
I mostly ran the 5 1/4 on the QL with the I can't remember what I think it was a CST controller, and that was double-sided. I think double-sided double density for the drive that I got, and then eventually upgraded to 3.5, which were quad density.
Well,
Yeah,
I know
we had-
the single sided was pretty popular because you could go down to like your local computer store, right, and get the little punch.
Mhm.
The notcher.
Like, so you could put, yeah, exactly.
Really?
Yeah,
I just used a paper
flippies.
punch for that.
Well,
So
yeah,
did
you
I.
can do that, but these were, it made a square,
Right.
cutout.
I did that with there was a higher density 3.5 inch, a 2.88 meg one, and we didn't have any of them at the time, and something density, and that was actually a hole drill with a drill, and it worked for a little bit, and then it got lots of errors, and yeah, so that was just sort of using it as a high density disk, but using low density media, 1.44 media.
Yeah, because I actually had those ED drives. They were on the QL 3.2 meg, and I actually went out and bought ED compatible floppies to go with it. I think there was an extra notch or something only to do. So that's probably what you did by the lower density ones, just put the notch in.
Yeah, it was a drill hole in those ones. It was actually a hole through. There was a little pin that went through it. And,
Yeah, with the Super Gold card, I think I had a gold card. They would support it at 3.2 megs, not the 2.88. They actually go higher.
and back in the day, we sold a machine that took 8-inch floppies, and I remember trying to convince a customer to swap over to it to the 5 1/4s, and he wouldn't because it was 500K on an 8-inch.
yeah.
And in his world, why would I go down to 360 or smaller? So
Also, that reminds me that back when the 5 1/4s first came out, they were called mini floppies
Mhm.
Yes.
compared to the 8 inches. So
Mm-hmm.
And then the 3.5s and 3.5 were micro floppies.
Yeah. So here's a here's a Maxell 3-inch disc, and I did not know that Panasonic also made them. And
You just found this out by going through your collection just now?
yeah, well, Neil Cohen sent me a bunch of discs and some disk drives that we don't know if they work or not. I have not gotten them to work yet, but it might be a power problem. I was trying to run it off a 1 amp 12-volt power supply, which was, I'm sure, is not enough to provide the power that the motor needs to get started up.
Hey, Dave, a lot of those drives, the 3-inch drives,
Yeah,
the power are swapped around. The 12's on the 5 and the 5's on the 12. So you got to
okay.
watch that.
Well, I have the Hitachi manual. It's on archive.org. That
Okay,
shows the
yeah.
shows the pinouts. But that's a good
I
point.
have some that are normal and some that are swapped. So I always have to
Oh.
really be careful when I put
Okay,
something together.
I'll double check that.
Yeah, the ones that I used in my Amstrad, they were word processing.
Yeah.
Built as a word processing machines, but 9915 or something like that. Anyway, they're swapped in there. The power's swapped. So
Oh, that's crazy.
I replaced one with a GoTech just for ease of use, and had to be real careful to swap the power around.
So, Joe, do you have a spare 3-inch drive that you know works?
4 or 5 of them.
Okay, well, we'll
Yeah.
talk offline then, because the
Yeah,
two I have, I
also
don't know
have
if they work.
I had the AMDEC, which is a standalone box.
Yeah.
It has dual floppies in it that you just basically plug the data cable into whatever.
Yeah.
I used it on a Coco back in the day. I still have that kicking around, and I just recently serviced that and made sure the belts were good. And those were direct drives.
Direct
Those are
drive.
the later ones, the direct drive ones. But I made sure it was all clean and the heads were cleaned and that kind of stuff, because I was thinking about putting that in the Amstrad, but then I just said, yeah, I'll just put in a GoTech.
Cool. So here's what an actual 3-inch disc looks like, and you can see there's a little metal shutter, and I think it's been a long time since I've opened one of these by hand, but there is a way to. Oh, it's on the side. There's a little thing that opens it up when you
hold it sideways. It's really thick, isn't it?
Oh,
Like, I
yeah,
mean,
it's what? That's got to be at
It looks
least
like almost like a
3/16.
cartridge. Huh.
It's pretty thick, and it's labeled. I mean, you can't see it, but well, you probably can't read it, but there's a little A here, and if I turn it over, there's a little B, so you know which side, you're sticking in. And I used to have a Zebra system a long time ago, and it was nice. Worked great. Like a fool.
That was the one that was over from Portugal. Was that right? Or
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was an FD. I had the FDD3, which is the little power supply brick, little floppy disk brick, and little interface card brick. Instead of the Jay Siegel, he had the 3000, which was all in one, and that was the one that would also run CPM.
You also had the RS-232 brick.
Yeah, that's right. Wasn't that in the interface brick? Because there were
No.
three. There were three pieces.
You had a 5x4 flat circuit board card that acted as the 2068 to Spectrum
Twister.
interface.
Yeah.
And then you had the little controller with the reset button on top.
Yeah.
That would plug into that, and then you had the coiled cable that went to the RS-232 brick.
Yeah.
And that would also, it had its own Z80 processor on board, and that became your CPM 2.2 machine if you had the software for it. And then you stack on top of it, then that's where you have your floppy drive, and then the very top was the power supply, and the power supply was linear, so you needed it on the top so it could vent easily.
Oh. I put it on the bottom.
That sounds like an easy to put together setup there. Like
It was very easy.
But it took up so much
I actually
space.
liked it a lot.
It took up so much space, especially with that big twister board. But
everything took up a lot of space in the 80s and
It
even
did.
the 90s. It was the way it was.
I think that was the whole point of it, right? Look at the TI-99 peripherals.
Oh my
They
God.
just kept stacking on the side until it's like 8 feet long.
That's why I'm going to live through Carl and Ryan. Whenever I want something, I'm going to request them to buy it. They can bring it over to my house. I'll look at it for a little bit. So That'll be good.
The
Carl, I
vicarious
want you to
thing.
get a QL. I haven't ever seen one of those before. All right.
Yeah, I've never. Yeah, I need to get one, but I don't. I never had one either. That was kind of later. I'd like to get a Z88 too. That'd be kind of nice to get one of those.
They're a nice machine. I had one and used it for quite a while until the screen finally died.
Mm.
I think I had 3 at one point with the Z88. I don't think I've got one left.
Of the
Not sure if it
Z88.
works or not. Yeah. I used it a lot. In fact, so when I was in the Air Force, I had to go to the 509th Bomb Wing in Whiteman Air Force Base, the B-2 Squadron. And I went into their facility and they're like, oh, by the way, folks, you're not allowed to bring laptops in. I'm like, oh, okay. I actually don't have one with me. Can I put my, I never pulled it out because they wouldn't know that I actually had it with me because it was so small and portable. It's easy to sneak in and out. So I got away with it.
Now we have to edit that out. Thanks a lot, Tim.
That's right.
Well, I know
They're
my
gonna
fast.
They're
Go
gonna
ahead.
cancel your pension, Tim.
There you go. I know my
used one in
I don't get a
fascination.
pension, so no big deal.
I used one in college. It was great because they had rules where you couldn't bring a laptop in because of the clickety click of the keyboards was disruptive to the professors. And so with the rubber chiclet keyboard, of course, they couldn't hear me. It's just sitting there typing as fast as they're talking. And
Nice.
funny how all the classmates were asking me for notes.
Yeah,
I know my
When I was
fascination
at,
with it was because of I had the TRS-80 Model 100. Right, the Radio
Yeah.
Shack, their first portable that all the journalists loved, right? Because it had everything built in, and that's what they kind of did all their stories on. But it's similar to the Z88, right? I think the Model 100 is probably much better
Less
than the
capable.
Z88 was, but
Okay, you ever show
No.
off their 100?
No.
I disagree with
Okay,
that.
now we have 2 people with Model 100s right there. Okay. All right.
I'll go
Z88
out
was
in
a
the garage.
well-refined machine. You had a built-in EPROM, as slot number
That's so
3.
cool.
You could have a mega RAM on board easily, internally even, if you opened it up. The
Only
Z88
a
was,
meg. Okay.
was
how big was the screen? What was the
back in 1988, it was great.
what was the width and columns on that?
108 by 8.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
that's
pretty
quite a bit.
wacky.
Then it had a little thumbprint on the right side, so you could see your the dimension of your document as you're working on it. No.
Oh,
And the operating system is called
You
Oz.
could also use the same disk drive on the Model 100. It would also work on the Z88.
Yeah.
Just serial based.
Really?
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
the-
I remember tinkering with that because I've actually got one of those drives and used on the Z8 for a little bit. But the best thing was you can get 20 hours on 4 AA's, but if you built a battery box of a bunch of D cells, you can probably run for a long time. I also use my Z88 with a portable 1200 baud modem because it's a VT. There's a comms part of the Z88 that's VT52. I connect into a Unix system at work, tell them I'm VT52, and I've only got 8 lines of display, but I can run their newsreader, and the RN would say, oh, okay, I understand 8 lines. Here's 8 lines. I didn't scroll or anything. It knew, my size. So it worked quite well.
that's
It
crazy.
could link up to Macs and PCs alike also.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
I
it was a
think
great machine.
I did the Z88 source book for the guys who did update systems. And I think I put a bunch of pinouts in there that I found online for the Spectrum to the Z88 and all the QL to the Z88 and all the others. So that's still out and about somewhere.
Holy
Well,
mackerel. I'm embarrassed because I had that Z88 source book sitting next to me and I didn't realize that Tim Swenson there's the Tim Swenson here. Oh,
The
I hate
question
getting
is,
old.
did you get the good copy or not? Because when Frank Davis did the first printout, he didn't, all of the ASCII text was kind of running, So I said, oh, Frank. So I redid it in hard copy for him, so everything was proper. And then he then printed out another copy of that edition, so that all of the ASCII text looked fine instead of being kind of garbled.
No, I got the good copy, and it's a great source for the Z88.
I just had fun looking stuff online and digging into what I could. I had the BBC basic book that sort of worked as BBC Basic on the Cambridge. The idea behind that also was to basically give Frank something that Frank can sell, make him money, and I didn't take any royalties on it. I said, here, Frank, to help me, for me to help support you, here's something. You can go print out hard copies. And I don't know how many you sold.
Tim, I have a couple of questions about this book. For one thing, when did it come out?
90. Let's see, I'm going to say probably 94, 95,
Oh,
maybe.
very late.
I was still in Ohio at the time.
Very late, even though it was 25 years ago, but
well,
whatever.
I got my Z88. I think I got it when I was in DC. So I got about 1991, 92. Was tinkering with it, using it. And I remember just wanting to know more and just started digging into things. As I found more, I would document it, I would experiment with it, and it was just a collection of whatever I could find. I think it is something similar with QLib. Before that, it was basically QLiberator, the QL, one of the QL basic compiler.
What's the lib book from the 70s? Or computer lib? Is that what you were referencing that? No?
No, QLiberator. Everybody calls it QLib, but QLiberator is the actual name of the compiler. There were two compilers for the QL, QLiberator and Turbo. Both are now publicly available. So on. I remember getting QLiberator and then tinkering with that and seeing how to do things, and then writing a document and making it available.
Sounds like
So
it's a
the Z8
play
source
on.
book was basically the same thing.
Sounds like it was just a play on the QL name. So Q Liberator.
Yeah, I
QL.
got it. Yeah. I misunderstood. I thought it was
Right.
another book that you had worked on. So
Yeah,
No,
Isaac
no, no.
Asimov
Q-Liberator is the
actually
compiler.
swore about the Z88 and how he was writing all of his novels on it. He loved it.
I'm sorry, who did?
Isaac Asimov.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
oh, that's cool.
Tim,
remember
is
using it on a ride to work on BART? That was fun also.
is that PDF
nice
that
thing
I
about
found
Z8
recently?
What was the question?
Your book is it that PDF that I stumbled across? I think it was on the Sinclair ZX World.
No. I don't think I've done anything recently at all with the Z8 source book. I haven't touched it. I could make it a PDF. It's around somewhere. Just have to get it. But I also released it just a plain text document online and on my website, so people can either get the soft copy or they get the hard copy from Frank Davis.
Yeah.
You know, Tim, you should send each and one of us the latest copy.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. Updated.
My printer is no longer working. I had an HP DC 8100. It would do 11 by 17 double-sided, had 3 trays. It was a large 70-pound printer I got free from work, and a couple toner
Did
cartridges.
you say
in it. It
70
ran for 10 years.
pounds? Tim, did you say it was
Something
70
like that.
pounds?
It is going to be. I could barely lift it. It's going to be it's probably about 20 inches wide, 12 or 14 inches deep, and probably a good 1.5 feet tall.
Wow.
Look up HP DN 8100. It is a large office printer. And the problem I have now it's dead. I can't get rid of it because no one's, oh no, we don't take office equipment, or like when you pick up, recycling stuff. So I'm like, what do I do with it?
Well, we're not asking you to print it out. We're just asking us to send us the document. That's all.
Oh, I could, let me write a note, just maybe work on that.
I want an autographed PDF.
I'll second
Actually, that
that
would
one.
be that difficult to do.
Hilarious.
So have we covered
I mean,
most
it's
of
so
this?
easy to do in open office. If I had pictures, I'll use, if I do anything with pictures, I do Scribus as the tool and everything else is open office because it's so easy to create a PDF in open office.
Yeah.
Well, you like to use all open source stuff, right? Is that why?
You bet. And I converted when I was running Windows some years ago, converted all open source. And then I went over to Linux. It was all the exact same tools because those tools are available for all 3 platforms. Easy to move over.
So what's your favorite Linux?
Speaking of the
distribution?
Z80, I use Ubuntu because it's the one I've really used. But when I was in DC about the Z88, I ran across a reporter for one of the local newspapers in DC, and she loved the Z88 because, like Andy said, she could go into places and they would complain about the clacking of keyboards and everything, but with her silent, no one ever complained. People were like, oh, that's kind of neat, go ahead, no problem. We don't care you using that because it's quiet. So I think she might have been for Washington Post or some newspaper like that. I can't remember how I met her and why but she came over my house one time, we talked for a bit on the Z88, so.
Well, I think we have had a few more people have joined. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. Is there anyone who joined recently, Andrew or Leroy, that are new? I'm sorry if I am talking to people who've already been on 6 times. If you guys can hear me.
I'm expecting a ZX Spectrum next soon.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Are you in the Kickstarter for the current round, or is this from the prior round?
This is from the current round.
Oh yeah. So,
The one that was
next
delayed
year.
for
Soon is a relative term.
Yeah.
Sometime next year.
So yeah, I'm expecting that. I got a lot of my stuff in for the QL that I showed you all last, and I'm having a little difficulty because I bought a QL to SCART adapter cable, and then I went ahead and got one of those SCART to HDMI boxes with a little 5-volt plug-in, and I put it all together and plugged it into an HDMI monitor, and lo and behold, if I get a screen, it's very black and I can barely see the F1, F2 for monitor TV, or I just get a blue screen. So I'm trying to figure out what is going on with that.
Andy, if you join the QL forums chat room, a bunch of guys in the UK have Next and have QLs and have S-cart cables and that sort of bit, and they might be able to help.
Okay. Yeah, I bought the cable from the UK, but the HDMI adapter I bought locally because I didn't think I needed to spend $60, and it's not the cost of the adapter. It's their mailing prices is astronomical.
Yeah, they know they're very good at the hardware because most of them love to have the original hardware. They also have a Discord channel that links into the IRC. On that again, this is Sinclair QL forum. Just Google it, and there's a link into the IRC, or you can look at the Discord and join Discord and chat with them there. There's a number of guys that do have all the hardware, including, there's some guys there that are big into Amigas, big into M-Strads, big into, so they've variety. So they've probably done this stuff before, whereas I don't get into the hardware, but they'll probably help you.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I didn't like the other platforms is because they all look like they've been through a cigarette factory, and I just can't stand that look. And plus the plastic, it's really brittle. And 2 machines I know that don't have that problem are the first generation and second generation TI-994As, the black with the silver, and of course the Sinclair products, including the QL. And so yeah, but I haven't seen a decent looking old Apple or Atari or Amiga that doesn't look like it.
You can bleach it. I've done it with my Apple IIc. There's ways to do that.
I've got a black Apple.
But that requires work.
It does.
Yeah, that's what they call retro brighting.
Yeah.
Or just get the Atari 800, which is brown to begin with.
No,
it's not yellowed. Even over that.
So who else has a Spectrum Next? I mean,
Just Carl? I think it's you, Carl. Oh, Jeff,
well, I think David raised his
yeah,
hand.
Dave,
Yeah, I got
David.
one from the first Kickstarter, and that
Yeah,
was
me
that
too.
was a long Kickstarter, but not as long as this one. I've been following. It's like, holy crap, you guys
How
are.
long is long are we talking about?
Oh,
It was supposed to come out August of 2020.
Yeah, I think we're
Oh,
going
wow.
3 years.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it was a year and a half or two for the first Kickstarter. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
It was about 2 years for the first one. I got that, and I'm waiting for the second one. So,
Jeff, what are you going to do with two?
I have two hands.
Oh, of course,
Like a rock keyboardist doing both of them.
and with the single keyword thing, you can type in programs 4 times as fast.
You betcha.
And I thought they did some improvements, right, on the second one. I don't know, I
Yeah.
can't remember what, but
They've added more RAM. They actually give you a switch now. It's external.
What do you mean a switch? You mean a power switch?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's an inline
Why?
switch, but they have a
That is an
different
update.
FPGA. They couldn't get hold of the old FPGAs, so they
Yeah.
have a newer version of that.
oh, okay. Yeah, because I know I pretty much expanded the hell out of mine. Put out the max RAM in it. I put the speaker in it. I put the SD card reader. I can't remember, but all the stuff you could expand it with. I know I did it with mine, but yeah, I thought they did something on the new one.
But did you
Yeah,
get a switch?
They all come with 2 megabytes now. That's one of the things they did add.
Yeah, the switch is my fingers pulling the cord out of the.
Carl, I bought like 5 inline switches. I can send you one.
I still never
Yeah.
understood Sinclair's aversion to power switches.
switch.
They put a reset
Thanks for
switch
joining us, Paul.
later on, but no power switch.
Well, granted,
Yeah.
but see that gives the next that Sinclair look and feel.
The
So
true
fine.
Sinclair power. Yes.
But
Well, that
remember,
doesn't
power at
really-
your fingertips.
That
We
just goes to
found out-
show. Oh, go ahead.
well, the reason was for the lack of the power switch was since it's a British computer and they wanted to be very cheap as possible. So saving a switch was one of those things. The British power taps all have a switch on them,
Oh, that's true.
That's true.
That's right.
but they never gave it a switch when they brought it to the US.
Well, I always looked at it that it never crashed. That's why you didn't need to ever
Right.
unplug it.
Right. Yes.
Unless you had a RAM,
Crash, they always unplugged it before I had a chance.
unless you had a RAM pack, then that.
Well, then you had a switch.
Here's my solution for a switch for my old ZX81, which is sitting right here, and of course Radio Shack came to the rescue.
Ooh.
Yeah. Very funny.
And so and they light up a nice amber color, so you can plug everything on. And how in the ZX81 it was like plug it in and it would crash and you have to unplug it and try it again a few times. Well, this one, just turn it on and turn it off. It solved that problem. So that was my
Wow.
solution for the ZX81.
That's hilarious.
Hmm.
Real quick, Willie, I put a link for the TS cartridge, the Timex Sinclair cartridge information in there, so you can find out how to cut out those 9 bytes from the beginning of a doc file. And
Oh, can I use that as a way to start talking about doc files?
go right ahead. Yes.
First
Yes,
of all,
that's
what
your
are you talking
segue.
about with Willie? Like, how do we get talking? I
Oh,
guess maybe
because
before the
He
meeting?
was having a hard time getting anything to run on the back bit on his 2068. I didn't realize that Evie already finished the 2068
I didn't either.
adapter because he's
didn't know that either.
Willie's got one. He
Yeah.
probably has the only one. Evie's probably
Actually-
like, man, I thought those guys were going to buy this crap.
Well, while I was waiting for you guys to come in, I bought mine tonight. So
Okay.
Yeah. It's really great. I mean, I haven't used it, like I said, on the Timex Sinclair, but. it's
But
awesome.
he couldn't get any of his
I couldn't get
programs
anything
to
to
load.
load. Yeah.
I see, Ryan, you've got one.
Yeah, I got mine, but I haven't gotten an SD card yet for the thing, the main part.
Yeah, mine, I've only got a 4 gigabyte one for mine, so I can't really load all my software.
And then I have I have to learn how to use this. So if I only knew someone lived near me to.
I wonder how that would work out.
So Ryan, I believe that there's a Albuquerque Sinclair user group.
Oh, okay.
So my wife went out to dinner this evening, and she was talking to someone. She went and she was eating at the bar, and she was talking to someone, and she was saying, my husband's going to be in a meeting, and she was like, the person was like, what is it? And she's like, it's a Timex Sinclair meeting. She's like, well, what's that? And she kind of explained it's about old computers, and like, I want to meet this lady's husband because apparently he goes around and buys old computers from the 80s and 90s, and he goes all around New Mexico, and he's a big collector. And I'm like,
Oh
wait a
my
minute,
gosh.
I gotta meet this guy. So anyway.
You need to invite him to our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He needs to show us his collection.
Right. Yeah. But the reason I wanted to talk about doc files is maybe I could kind of segue into this. When we ended our group meeting last time, on when did we have it? Last Sunday? I said I wanted to, well, I suggested, I didn't say, that I wanted to talk about the cartridges. And I was hoping maybe Carl and maybe some other people could come forward and talk about, well, I wrote down what the heck I want to talk about.
Well, we were talking sort of just before we started with Willie, because he got a backbit cartridge from Evie, and that's, I think, is it backbit.io is the website.
Yeah.
And she's been on a couple of our sessions, and she, was working on the 2068 interface piece for it. And so it turns out Willie is the first one to have one, or Ryan, did you have one too? I saw
Yeah, I did.
You got the 2068 interface. Oh, and okay, and Jeff. Okay, cool. So it's only Carl and Adam. The
Yeah, I didn't even know. I know last
Albuquerque user group did not.
Well,
2/3 did not get it yet.
I actually wasn't aware that it was available yet either, so I don't have one. Yeah.
Well, what I did was when she was on, I went to the site and you could pick the 2068 adapter. So I went and just ordered it right then, and then whenever that it was finished, then I guess it got shipped. So.
Actually, Ryan, that you mentioned that, I did check that and I did see that there, but I knew, we had just talked to her, so I figured they weren't even done. So I didn't order one because I was like, it was still in flux. But I do remember now that you mentioned that it was on her site at that time. I just didn't order one.
Okay. So, and so Willie is having difficulty getting anything to load from it. And we were talking, he said he tried some TZX files, and did you try TAP files, Willie?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, and TAP files. All right. And we got on the topic of doc files, which are the doc file format was used by the Warievo emulator, and it took the cartridge, the ROM image from Timex Sinclair cartridges, and put a 9-byte header on it so that it could, sort out stuff it needed to know about the cartridge. And so if you go on the internet and you search for Timex Sinclair cartridges for the 2068, all you're going to find are doc files, because that's what's been preserved. And if you want to turn those back into something that you can burn to an EPROM, or I think, Willie, something that you can load using the backbit, you've got to cut off that 9-byte header from the file. And you can do that with like a hex editor. I've done it in a program called Sublime Text, which is a text editor. But it will open things up and show me what does it show? It shows a hexadecimal list of the thing. So and I just count over and delete the 9 and then save it. And it turns out to be the right size, exactly 8192 or 16384 bytes, depending upon which one. So give that a whirl, and I am willing to bet that will solve your problem.
Well, you can always contact Evie. I'm sure she'll also tell
you
what you need to do. She's probably the person to ask.
She can set you straight.
I'm wondering also if you can't use the tail utility in Linux.
Sure.
There's an option to start at a byte offset. So you can start with the 10th byte, I guess.
That should work. I've done it before with hex
With-
values.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll give
So-
it a shot, see what happens.
Yeah. Tail. Give me the last 8192 bytes of the file.
Well, you could say the option looks like it's a tail -C and then plus num to
I
start
think
with
there's an
byte
inverse
num.
on head that will work as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you could there's probably equivalent there too.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're on Windows, I use HXD. It's a
Wow.
it's a hex and disk editor. and
Yeah.
that works pretty well.
Wow, I haven't seen that. I haven't been on Windows.
That's also what I use too. I used it just yesterday. So
So there's no sites out there that have like a bin file, just a ROM dump
No.
of cartridges.
No.
Because I know
yeah,
they do
I've
that.
not seen them either.
I know
No.
they did that for the 1500 cartridges.
There's
They have ROM, just pure ROM dumps.
well, the only doc file collection I'm aware of is the guy in Germany, whose website escapes me, but I'll dig up the link. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I don't actually know where I get mine. I don't know. It's from a site, but I don't know where its location is.
I think it's a .de
Yeah.
domain.
And there was only 4 official ones from Timex, right? And then there's about 20 or 30 ones that have been made over the years, like that are non-official.
I thought Timex had more than 4. I know they
Yeah,
only
there's-
had 4 for the 1500. I thought they probably had 7 or 8.
Yeah.
the
Yeah, they had
2068?
7 for the 2068 and 4 for the 1500.
Right.
Oh, they had 7. Okay.
Yes.
Carl, were we talking about pinball? The pinball cartridge for the 2068?
I thought I remember something that was talking about it because I don't think it ever came out.
Yeah,
So-
I
I
got
think
it.
So that's
Okay.
the thing is I just like yesterday or the day before, as I'm still indexing, I'm down to under 500, still indexing articles. And I came across a little blurb about some liquidator out in California that had Flight Simulator and the unreleased pinball cartridges. This is back in the, whatever. So they did make
Right.
it out into the wild, and look at that,
Right
Willie.
there's
I'm
the
gonna,
pinball cartridge.
I'll be
Yeah,
damned. Yeah, that's
That's the actual Timex pinball cartridge.
so. Willie, do you remember where you got that from?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Like I say, I've got about 6 of these actual cartridges that Timex came out with, and then a bunch that I've made, of course. But these are the actual ones in my collection, which was Androids, States and
Mhm.
Capitals, pinball,
Yeah.
and
I
then
thought they made some Horus ones too. I think there was 2 Horus, the Spider or Horus ones.
Flight Simulator,
Maybe Horace goes skiing.
then Casino One, and Budgeter.
Huh. Okay.
Because
Wow.
everybody likes budgeting.
Oh, I bet you there's states and capitals.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I've
got
actually
States and
got a
Capitals.
list of all the cartridges and their number. Like Budgeter is 07-2000. The very first 2 were supposed to be ViewCalc and ViewFile, but apparently were not released.
I don't have
Pinball
those.
is 07-4000. Androids is 07-4001. So I got a list. I can't remember where I got it from. I'm sure I just trolled it from somewhere. I've got a list. Apparently, Penetrator and Sword Fight were not released either.
I thought Penetrator came out. I thought I'd seen a Penetrator cartridge.
Well, I think
That's what I've
it definitely
got
came out on
written
tape.
down. So
Well, yeah, it was on tape,
Yeah.
but I thought you never know, man. There's so many years gone by, right?
And, Penetrator was a 32K cartridge.
And then you
Wow.
don't know what TC brought out in Portugal.
Right.
Yeah. And to answer your question, Dave, the 7 that I had were all bought from Zebra Systems.
Okay.
That's what I got
Okay.
I
mine.
don't know where I got all. I've got 6. I don't know where I got them.
yeah, the list I have shows 7 that were released and then 4 not released. So again, I probably found this listing somewhere online because it has the catalog number.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've also got the catalog numbers for some of the other ones for entertainment, education by segment somewhere.
Well, all I can tell you is I know I've got the flight simulator cartridge for the 1500 for 1510. I know I showed that
That
on
makes you
here.
happy.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, you can't find the dump for it anywhere. They have the dumps for all the other cartridges, but nobody has a dump for the flight simulator.
So
And
this
will
reminds
that
me
be
of a
coming along
comment I got
soon?
a couple days ago
Yeah.
on one of my my Amiga videos. I'm showing off my collection. I've got it in like 7 boxes. And I got this comment that said, "Oh, you're a hoarder. You've got too much stuff. You need to share all that." And I'm like, "Hey man, I didn't say this, but I was like, this is my stuff. It's okay. It's just my stuff." But Carl, you're a hoarder. You got to share
Yeah,
that.
You gotta share
yeah.
that. You should.
You know, I paid money for this house. I'm going to put whatever I can put into it.
There's a fine line. There's a fine line between a hoarder and a preserver.
Mhm.
That's right. Historian.
That's right. I put a link to the guy in Germany who has this website about Sinclairs and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
he has a
good
page,
site.
the list full of doc images.
Yeah, I've seen that. I didn't know he was in Germany there. That's interesting.
Yeah, the .de. Yeah.
Kind of gives it
Pay
away.
attention, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like 2 or 3 years old. If you look at them articles, if it's the same website,
Yeah, it
that's
says
where I downloaded
2019.
the majority of my doc files, and then I read his explanation on how to put it all together. And, I mean, it's worked great. The one that I thought was real interesting was the 4 programs on one cartridge, and that's cool because it's got a little menu, and you've got four games on one cartridge, and I don't know how he does. He explains how he does it, but that's over my head.
Are you talking about the Ariel Ranieri
In Portugal,
cartridges?
right?
Might be.
Yeah.
He's in Portugal, yeah.
No, he's in like Brazil.
Or Spain, or
Yeah,
But he's selling them on eBay for like, $45 or something like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but he's got a ton of he's got a ton of the files you can download on his web page, and he tells you what blocks of memory to use and all that to run them. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, he even has like Zaxxon. I've seen that he's running like Zaxxon on the 2680. I was like, wow.
But I thought when he put all the 4 games on one EPROM, I thought that was kind of neat. And I noticed like you said, he's selling the ones on eBay. I think it's got 4 or 5 games on them.
Yeah.
But you can probably do that pretty easily if you have one of those cartridges that has the jumper block, so you can select what chunk.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Well, the one I did with the 4 games, he just sets it up. I think it's banks 4 and 5, if I remember right. But you can play any of the games that's on that cartridge just with that. You don't have to change the chip.
Right. Yeah, because he's got a menu. Right.
Yeah, he's got a menu and it loads whatever game you decide to play.
Right.
Kind of neat.
But if you had the jumper ones, then you could just put the cartridges. Well, assuming they were 8K cartridges, you could put them in 4, 5, 6, and 7, and just change your jumpers around. And so when the 26.8 booted, it would go, "Oh, okay, you got a cartridge in this chunk."
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So, Adam, speaking of cartridge images, you've been working with Qbert.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I can talk about that now. So I don't want to get too. It's not that it's going to be too technical. I think everyone here is tech enough to understand what I'm going to be talking about. So if anyone listens and reads the posts that I've been putting up there on groups.io, I've been trying to use Qbert, and I have been using it. And apparently it's a prototype. I don't know where it was dumped or who dumped it or how long it's been around, but I guess for a long time, because David said he sees mention of it on in the newsletters. Is that right, David?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There his reviews. I saw something. Yes.
Yeah. So it's obviously been around since probably at least the early 90s or the 80s. Someone dumped it. Anyway, it's available on the internet, and I think I downloaded it from that site that David links to. I think that's where I got it, or maybe David's site. I can't remember, but it's a doc file. It's an 8K doc file with a 9-byte header, and I learned how to take that off from David, like we were just talking about here. And apparently, either I don't understand how to start it in joystick mode, or it doesn't support joysticks. I don't know. But on this past Wednesday, I had a buddy come over and we were messing around with the Timex Sinclair and also the Odyssey 2 with the backbit cartridge. And there was, I was like, if anyone can get this to work, my friend Chris can always, he'll press everything, get it to work. And he figured out, like, if you press A or B, the game starts faster or slower. But for getting a joystick to work, I don't know. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna look at the code, which is kind of a stupid thing to say because AK is a lot more code than it seems like when you first start looking at it. But so I took the 8,192 byte file. It's just a hex file, and I have experience messing around with this on the Astrocade platform, which also is a Z80 system. And I just started looking at the code, and I've been uploading it. I don't know if anyone has looked at it, but I have some questions, and I'm hoping maybe some people can give me some answers for tools and things like that. So first of all, is there anyone here who's interested in talking about this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We want to hear it.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So what I've done so far is I've gotten, because Jeff has mentioned that he has, you have to be careful about getting to the data areas accidentally when you're disassembling a file. And I'm using a popular disassembler called, well, popular to me. It's popular in the Spectrum world, called DZ80. And it's kind of old, but it's just got disassembled Z80 files. So I've been using that. And once I realized how this is an LROS cartridge, by the way. So if you guys aren't aware, there's a few different kinds of cartridges, which Carl, check me out on this and make sure I'm not making any mistakes. There's LROS and AROS. And there's two kinds of AROS cartridges. There's ones that, well, three really. There's ones that are machine language in AROS. There's ones that are basic, and then there's ones that I think can be a mixture.
Right.
And those all run from 8,000 area in RAM or ROM, or I guess it doesn't matter because it is ROM. But the LROS cartridge turns off the operating system and runs from 0, which is pretty cool because then you can, if you guys are familiar with Z80 programming, you can use the restarts. And so you can use all the restarts. And this program does. It uses, well, it doesn't use the one at 0 because it can't, because that's being used for the header. But it uses the rest of them. I think was there 7 restarts or 8, something like that. And so that's handy because it also gives me points of entry into the code, so I know where there's actual code. And once you start digging in a little bit into the code, you start being able to follow the jumps. And so that's where I'm going so far. I have not actually started documenting and following the code too much, except a few places. Jeff noticed a few things and pointed them out to me, which gave me a heads up. Speaking of that, Jeff, you made the header file that David pointed out to me. And I was hoping that you could explain to me if my version of ZMac is outdated, or how to make it so the header file works and assembles correctly, because some of it assembles with the labels correctly and some doesn't, because there's colons in some of the areas for labels and not. So I don't know if like my version doesn't support that, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and I believe the version of ZMac I'm using will allow you to have will allow you to have colons on labels.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what version of ZMac you're using.
Well, my version requires colons on labels, and so if there's no colon, it doesn't work. Like it sees it sees it as an error.
Right.
So,
but things like equates, I think you're allowed to have colons in the equate.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. So what I ended up doing is I just took out the ones I needed out of the header file for now and just put it into the source code. So yeah, that's the project I've been working on, and I don't really know how far I'm going to take it. But what I've learned in the past with other systems is doing a disassembly forces you to learn what the heck is going on with the hardware. And so you start following the code and you're like, oh, so that's what's happening here. And then
But as you mentioned, Adam, AK is a lot of code to go through disassembly.
I know. I'm not doing a 16K cartridge. How's that?
Well, yeah. The only thing I could mention is you probably want to focus in on the I/O ports for the joystick. Right. Look at those 2 opcodes.
There's none there yet. So
okay.
Yeah, but
Because
you're
maybe
right.
maybe it doesn't even support you. If you can't find those opcodes for the ins or outs for that port, then I mean, even if they're in data somewhere, the odds of you having the opcode for in or out and the port number, right,
Mhm.
are probably
Yeah.
fairly rare, right? So I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if
agree.
you could find it anywhere in there, then at least you would find out if it's trying to use those ports at all.
Oh, you're saying search for the opcode and the actual binary file rather than disassembling.
Right.
Oh, I haven't
Those
done
two
that.
together, right? They got to be
Right.
one after the other. Right. So, if you can search through that, and then at least
That's a
it'll
good
give
idea.
you an idea where in the code that opcode might even be. Right.
Yeah.
So you can start kind of looking and disassembling areas around there. Of course, you could be in the middle of a data array and it's a red herring, but I mean,
Yeah.
it still gives you it still gives you an opportunity to see if that's even possible, and because the game may not support joysticks
Yeah, I agree. It might not.
unless there's some documentation on it, which I highly doubt, I guess, at this
I-
point. But
I haven't been able to find any. And if
Yeah.
it really is a prototype, then I don't
do we
think there
know
is
who
probably
do
gonna
we
be
do
any.
we know who wrote it, or
Well,
I
Parker
don't.
Brothers,
Does
right?
anyone? Well,
I mean,
Parker Brothers, yeah.
that's who had
but
the copyright. So who
Yeah.
knows? But Adam,
Yeah.
one of the things that I have done in trying to figure out what is sort of as a shortcut for figuring out what's in a ROM image is to open it in a hex editor, the binary file, and look at potential string values.
I tried to find the string value for a game because when it first comes up,
Yeah.
it says game with a question mark, and I thought, hey, well, that's a string.
That would be right.
But I can't find that string. I even did a search for the
Okay.
string. So I
Okay.
don't know if it's using its own characters or what it's doing there.
so sometimes too, I know when I was doing programming from the Timex, a lot of times the end of the string you would have like bit 8 inverted, right?
Yeah. So it'd just be GAM.
Right. So it wouldn't really
Say this again?
whatever the last bit 8 or bit 7 would be inverted, would be high.
Oh.
Right. So that tells the when it prints it out, that's the end of the string.
And yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
was
when
it,
you
was it the
search
word?
for it,
Yeah. Search for GAM instead of game.
Okay.
or if it's game question mark, then just search for game and leave off the question mark, because the question mark's probably, you're going to have 80 hex higher than whatever the character code is.
Right. I'll
Because
check
it
into
uses-
that. I didn't
Yeah.
notice it, but I mean,
Adam, just to crush your soul,
Oh,
since
crush
this
my
is
soul.
well, since this is an LROS, unless they've included the print routines, something like the print routines from the ROM,
Oh, good
what you
point.
may end up with is game may actually be a bitmap that
That
they
is
stream
true,
out.
too, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I've
So I
encountered
hope-
that on the Astrocade actually. Because,
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope that's ruined your night.
Oh, well, not really. I mean, it's part of the fun of it, honestly.
And
if I get the joystick to work, actually, I'll probably play it for 15 minutes and I'll be done. So,
in case nobody knows, LROS is a language, right? Language ROM. So basically that was, I think the intention there was they were going to maybe do CPM or Forth or Pascal, they're going to do language cartridges,
Yeah.
right? Which basically it's a whole new ROM you can put into the Timex. And AROSs are application, right? Application programs. So they still use the Timex ROM, right? But they're just built on top of it, right? LROSs could be, you could totally, redo whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
You're
I was
in
actually
total
wondering
control.
why they would have chosen to go the LROS route with this, because it seems like they could take advantage of everything that's inside and use all the routines that are built into the operating system, but they chose not to. Unless they is there another Z80 language or another Z80 computer maybe they were porting it from, like the ColecoVision or something? That's possible, I suppose.
Well, given the way that the memory layout in the 2068 works, it makes sense for them to be able to jump around the basic ROM, because that way you don't have to futz around with trying to bank things in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
maybe also the
more-
documentation wasn't out there yet for it, or I don't know. I mean,
It's
depending on how early it was.
I would think to make an LROS, I mean, you have to know the intimacies of the hardware of the 2068, because you're going to have to do your own keyboard routines, your
Right.
own video routines, everything IO wise. You're going to have to recreate
Do
on
it
your own.
yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
All these cartridges disable the ROM and everything runs from the cartridge. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not necessarily.
No, AROSs are usually from 8,000 hex and up, the upper 32K, right? Because they need to rely on, they rely on the fact that the Timex ROM is in control.
Oh,
right? They use the Timex routines,
so it does
right?
use okay, gotcha.
Yeah. LROS is, like I said, LROS is you're replacing the Timex ROM, basically, with whatever ROM you want. So like probably OS 64, right? It's probably an LROS.
Right.
Yeah, it is actually.
Right. So because it replaces the Timex ROM. And it's, when you think about it, that's kind of ingenious from that standpoint. I don't know that the Commodore could do that. Commodore had tons of cartridges, but I don't know that they had cartridges where they could actually replace the kernel and the three ROMs that are in the C64. I don't know that you could do that with a cartridge.
Well, I got they got the Spectrum ROM, of course, that you can put in for Spectrum. What I find interesting is one of my Spectrum ROMs, I have to do an out command for it to turn on Spectrum. I've got another version of Spectrum ROM that it just boots right into Spectrum right away.
Yeah.
Like any of my other cartridges.
Right.
You don't have to do no out commands or nothing.
And Willie, that's on a cartridge, right?
Yeah, it is on a
Yeah.
cartridge.
So there was do you remember Bob Orfeld?
Oh yeah.
So Bob figured out how to do that. And what he did was there's a little patch of code that he published for the Spectrum ROM that did exactly the thing that you're describing. And if you altered the Spectrum ROM image, it would give it the 8-byte header that it needed and still work work the way it should.
I have a copy of the ROM that does it because I made a chip that has both the 2068 and the Spectrum ROM that's modified, and I can switch between the two. So if anyone wants a copy of the ROM file, I've got it.
Is
I've got a copy of the one I'm talking about too. It's version 3, whatever that means. But
so Greg, is that for a cartridge ROM or internal?
It's to replace the ROM and the machine itself. I don't know how much different that is with the.
Oh yeah, so that one, literally you could pull out the Timex ROM chip and slap a Spectrum ROM chip into your Timex, and you're done. You've got a.
And then you've turned your Spectrum or your Timex stupid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you basically have. But
I know in mine, David, I actually had, this is back in the 80s. I bought a Spectrum ROM from Europe, right, UK, back in the 80s, and I just piggybacked them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what did you pull off, like a little pin?
Yeah. You pull the chip select lines out, and it goes to a switch. I drill the hole for in the back, so you turn it off.
That's essentially what I had.
Right. But the cartridge one that I think David's talking about, that the one that came with the TC 2068, right, the Portugal one.
Yep.
That's a cartridge.
Yep.
And you could just plug it, I have that cartridge, you can plug it in and it just boots up in Spectrum mode.
But the TC 2068 is ever so slightly different, and it will support that. But to do that on the TS 2068, you have to make this ever so slightly small patch to the original ROM, burn that to an EPROM, and it'll work just like Willie's does.
Well, that'll be interesting to really understand, because I just assumed it was an LROS.
Yeah, I'll send
they turned the Spectrum ROM into an LROS, and so you can just it replaces the factory Timex ROM.
Yeah. Bob Orfeld had figured it out. I'll dig it up. But to your point, Carl, about the language types for an LROS, you remember AROS? I'm sorry. Remember Jeff Mazur sent us the third-party software guide, and that thing talks about what kind of language types that AROS would support, and they planned. The one is basic and machine language. Then the other one is machine language only.
Mm-hmm.
Third option is Logo, And the
Oh,
fourth
that's right.
option is Pascal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? So, there must have been, it's at some point in somebody's brain, it was like, okay, we're going to come out with, Pascal for the 2068 and logo for the 2068.
Well, I went to school in the what was it? I took logo class in '86, and I was in what, 8th grade, and so I don't know if you guys have took logo or anything like that, but it was a pretty neat little language for beginners, and I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Hey, Carl, when I had my OS 64, and I bought it from Zebra, they had discussed that the OS 64 actually utilized the dual display mode of the 2068. So if that cartridge was an LROS, and so it was bypassing the Timex ROM routines, how do they actually go through and utilize the dual display modes?
Well, I don't know if you remember, Andy, I remember doing this. I remember, sitting down at my friend's 2068 back in '84 and looking in the manual, and there's a somewhere in the 2068 manual, it says, and do this to get 64 columns. And what they didn't tell you was, and a whole lot more in order to make 64 columns actually work, right? But there was an out command or a poke or something like that put your 2068 into 64 column mode. And like you said, it uses both display files, and one display file is like, say, the odd columns, and the other one is the even columns, right? And this is why the draw and the plot and the circle commands don't work properly. If you draw a circle in the OS 64, it like does these little dashed lines instead of the circle.
It's using one display mode.
Yeah, right. It's drawing the circle in one display file, but not in the other. It's not doing not doing the math. And in the technical manual, there is a sample of code of how to make the 64 column mode work. And Wes Brzezowski also wrote a little program that would do that in you could load it in BASIC, and it would make the 64 column mode work for most things. So the Zebra thing is some kind of extension of that. I mean, it's not using it's not replacing a bunch of the ROM routines, but it's doing the math that the ROM routines can't do.
Well, the other thing, they may have just copied, whatever the routines for that display were from the Timex ROM and put them into the OS 64.
Well, also, I did say it's LROS, but maybe I'm mistaken. So someone
the OS 64 is LROS.
I think so, but
I think you're right. I think it does boot. Yes, it is.
How do you
yes,
know?
It is.
You just looked something up or what?
What? No, I just had to think about it for a second. Okay. Because so here's how I'm thinking about it.
You've got a data file in your head. You're like, I've got this.
Let me just read those bytes real quick in my head. And...
No. So actually, I just happened to have. I mean, I don't happen to have. I did go looking for it. I have the third-party software guide open because I wanted to find out. I knew about the Pascal thing. I was trying to remember what it was, and so I just sort of scrolled backwards and got to the LROS section. And the other reason that I know is because you can put a Spectrum ROM and an OS 64 ROM on the same EPROM chip and just switch back and forth between the two. So therefore they both started at 0.
Oh, well, that reminds me of something that happened Thursday when Ryan was over here. So Ryan was showing me how his program's compatible with the Spectrum. So I put in the Spectrum ROM in the back that's on the RGB card that you have, David.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, we're done with that. We're going to use the OS 64 ROM. And so I put the cartridge in. I'm like, why isn't it working now? What's going on here? So it was going into Spectrum mode, and I didn't even realize it. So it was overwriting. It was like the OS 64 wasn't there. So I was like, oh, I need to take out the Spectrum ROM off the back.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
And then it worked. But I
Yeah.
was
And the
like
other-
scratching my head.
And the other thing, Andrew, is what you have to look at it from the standpoint, I don't know, whoever made OS 64, but if you understand how the video display circuitry in the SCLD is working, right, then of course you can build the code around that. That's the lowest common denominator is once you know what the hardware is doing or needs to do, then you can just write the software to be able to do that. And they may have done that, right? They may have written their own video routines.
I thought there was one of the newsletters, I can't remember what that you just recently uploaded, David, to the website. If I'm not mistaken, there's a 2-page deal in there that you can type in that does the same thing as the 64 cartridge.
Similar. Yeah, that was Wes's. That was Wes's code, and it had some shortcomings.
Yeah, that's the one that did the same thing though. I mean, it gave you the 64 column stuff without the cartridge.
Yep. I mean, there was there's
Go
some
ahead.
limits.
Yeah, and that's why chunks, 0 and 1, right? That's 16K. So that's the home ROM, right? Chunks 2 and 3, that's the low 16K RAM, right? And that I consider that the video RAM because the SCLD and the CPU can access that RAM, not concurrently, but they both can have access to it. But that's really what the SCLD reads to output the video. That's where the video information is in that lower 16K, right? That's why you can't really bank out chunks 2 and 3 because it would confuse the bit. It's hardwired to the SCLD.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you can bank out chunks 2 and 3 because video hardware will always look at that RAM. So if you want to write to the screen in your code, you have to bank that back in so you can actually access it.
You're right.
Yeah.
So I was going to say it's hardwired. It's hardwired to that 16K. So if you bank switch it and didn't turn it off, right, like Jeff is saying, and wrote video information, well, the SLD can't read it because it's not wired to it. It's out in your bank somewhere, right? You have to, you'd have to write it to that 16K that's inbuilt to the 2068. Yeah.
Hey, Keith, you just posted something to the chat about the Airco disk interface initializing as an LROS. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, when it, of course, is built into the interface and it acts like a LROS software, which it is. And as soon as you turn it on, it jumps to that starting point that's specified in the ROM, and it copies itself to the second chunk of memory. And it also copies the first chunk of the home bank to the first chunk of the dock bank. And then it makes changes to it so it intercepts the J error so that it jumps to the code in the second chunk instead of giving you a invalid device error or something like whatever the device J is. That's what it's trapping, the device J error.
Oh, okay.
And it's easy to modify the code. I've modified the code many times to write the way I want it to work. And since the Airco has a full 64K of dock bank memory, mine has four. Well, it actually has 256K. It's 4 chunks of 64K, but I hardly ever use the other 3 chunks, or other 3 dock banks. But in any case, you can write AROS programs easily with the extra 64K that's in the Airco interface.
Interesting. Sounds like Airco was way ahead of the time with understanding the bank switching.
I bought my first one from them in middle of 1984, excuse me. Yeah, they modified their ROM several times. I think the first one I had was version 8.8, and the best one that I had from them was 9.1, I believe. I've modified it several times more. I think I got up to 10.5 for my modification to it. But I modified their software because theirs required the the code that the Timex had. Forgot now where it was located, but the RAM resident RAM code.
Yeah.
My memory's getting a little foggy, but the Timex or the Spectrum wouldn't run with that. So I modified it so that if it detected a Spectrum in control, it would change the software so it didn't have to go through the RAM resident code. It would just jump to the spot it needed to in the Spectrum ROM rather than running through that code to find it in the Timex ROM.
Nice.
So my version would run both the Spectrum ROM and the Timex ROM. And then later on, I modified it so it would run the OS 64 code. But all of it was loaded in my first 2 chunks of the dock bank.
That'd be interesting to take like a Spectrum program, right? And then you could remap it to the 2068 or the 2068 routines, right? That way you could run a Spectrum program on the factory 2068 ROMs.
Well, you could do that. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Hey, Leroy, is there a schematic for the Airco interface out there anywhere?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Matter of fact, Airco even sold their code for their software. That's how I got involved rewriting it. Was I sent them $20 and they sent me a disk with their code on it and CPM code. It was for a CPM operating system, but and that you guys were talking earlier. I first learned how to.
You were running CPM on your 2068 then?
You can, yes, with the Airco interface, it allows that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a wow.
It's kind of slow with the display for the Timex, but if you use a monitor and it's the dual serial point from the Airco system, it's pretty fast.
So you hung a terminal off your Airco?
Yeah, I had to use a terminal. If you wanted to get on the internet, not internet, but get on the bulletin boards at the time, you needed that extra monitor to do it with. You couldn't do it through the, well, you could, but it took you. I think I had to put in 50 mils to do it with without the monitor.
That's hilarious. Carl, I think I might have some schematics, but not the 256K RAM module that Keith is talking about. I'm just taking a quick look.
Yeah, no, Andrew was asking the question to me directly, but it's been so long since I really delved into the hardware. You generally don't mess with chunks 2 and 3. You can, right? Obviously, but he's asking basically there might be a contention, right? Because there's bank switching software in chunk 3. Is that right? I mean, chunk 3 always has. Well, chunk 3 always has to have. I think every bank, right? That is kind of the common chunk, right? Where you have the bank switching code.
Unless you've used the video mode change service, in which case all of that gets moved up into high memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets complicated. Your statement, don't muck with chunk 3, is probably the safest thing to say.
Yeah, because you do it at the wrong time, right? Yeah, it's going to crash the system because it has no common code. But so yeah, you have to be careful and cognizant, I guess, when you're switching off chunk 3. And I don't know. I don't think the 2068 uses obviously 16K of RAM for video. It's not all video, but
chunk 3 is system variables and like you said, the RAM resident code, and so
and I think chunk 2 is primarily the video. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's just the chips that they're using, they're 16K chips, right? So I mean, you can't separate them independently like that. I mean, addressing wise, obviously you can, which is what they're doing with the chunks. But so hopefully that answers that question. But you're right. You can switch chunk 3 out, but you got to be careful.
Well, the machine will do interesting stuff. Most of it not very useful, but
magic smoke will leave.
It might give Adam some new art to look at.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Good idea. Right, Willie.
Oh,
Hey,
they
I
were
have another question for Jeff, actually. What other tools are there that I can use to help making, or maybe perhaps make like in the Spectrum world, what tools do they use to do disassembly? Because there's so much stuff out there, like for programming and disassembling in the Spectrum world that I just don't know about. And I'm sure most of it's applicable to the 2068 in some way.
Well, if you're using, I did take a look at the DZ80 disassembler, the documentation online, and actually you can do quite a bit with that. It uses the Lua language to allow you to set things up. And that's one of the better ways I've seen to do disassemblies, because you can use the Lua language to set boundaries for where data areas are and things like that. So
yeah, on the Astrocade world, that's why I chose that one, because there was someone who was familiar with the Lua language, and they wrote a script that you can point basically to a cartridge, and it doesn't automatically disassemble the cartridge, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and then it will automatically document any of the onboard system routines that are in the Astrocade, which is many of them. And so if someone was to write a script for DZ80 for like the 2068, they could probably do that for like an AROS cartridge that would just, I mean, there's only 7 cartridges for the system though, really. So, I mean, it's not probably worth it, but.
Well, the other thing, kind of what Andrew was alluding to, when I built my diagnostic cartridge, I wrote that in assembly, and my big disassembler was Hot Z. For one reason was because Ray Kingsley wrote it, and Ray was, well, I don't know if he's still with us, but he was up in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Right. And he wrote, and Hot Z is period correct. I'm sure there's better assemblers now, but I mean, for what it was back then, that thing was the bee's knees as far as I was concerned.
And you were running it on the actual 2068, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Super Hot Z was very good too.
What's that? Super Hot Z. Yeah, it was also, he wrote all those, but it was, it knew about the bank switching, it knew all the internal routines. It wasn't just a plain Jane. Oh, I'm sure the earlier ones probably were, but he did a lot of work on that. It was, he made it pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
I think I have about 4 versions that he had wrote. They're fantastic. That's how I learned Z80 code, was with his program.
Right. Yeah, I think the later ones were called Super Hot Z, but it's still, I just call them all Hot Z because that's kind of what he kind of named them.
And there's always the online disassembler, Adam, that we talked about before. I think David dropped the whole chunk of code in there and said it was a bit slow with the big binaries, but
yeah, it's pretty cool. I like that one a lot. It's also, that one's really good at finding strings. It has a function for that.
And it follows the jumps too, doesn't it?
It's got some nice little built-in features. But I've used that one for strings explicitly. Yeah. So Carl, I made a Hot Z cartridge out of one of the doc images. And it's really cool. I love it.
I think it'd be real easy to put it in a padded envelope and send it off to me.
Send it to you? Okay. No problem.
I haven't used Hot Z, man, in 30 years.
Well, then you can give us a tutorial.
Yeah, well, I did that whole diagnostic cartridge was written in Hot Z.
David, I think you should make him a deal. When he sends you his printout for his diagnostic cartridge, the code, you'll send him the Hot Z cartridge, okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, the code printouts are like, a half inch or an inch thick.
There's 14 of us on right now. We'll all pitch in, type in 3 pages. We'll be done in the night.
That's what scanners are for, man.
Yeah. That's the only thing I'm dreading, is putting all that code back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not written by hand, is it?
My experience for doing that is, go ahead.
Is it printed out, or you didn't write it?
It's printed out. It's 2040 printouts.
Okay.
And I have a lot of comments.
Wow.
It's all commented because back then I was really big on commenting, so I could go back later and understand what the hell I was doing here.
And here's later.
Yeah.
It is later. Yeah. What I found is if you have the actual listing, not the assembly source, but like a listing of it that shows the code on the right hand side, or excuse me, the left hand side, what I've done when I've had listings like that, and I actually have to retype it all, I type in a listing, or excuse me, the binary code, and then I just disassemble it along with the source code, and I get it back really fast. And it's a lot easier because you're starting from the ROM, as long as you don't mistype it, which I suppose you can. But then you have the output already, what you expect with the source code. If you have the listing, I don't know if you even do. If you just have the source code.
It's a hot Z listing, so of course
Okay.
it's going to have the line number, it's going to have
Yeah.
the opcodes,
Yeah,
and
that
it's
is
going to have the
best way to do it, I
mnemonics.
think.
Right, it has the mnemonics, the opcodes.
Yeah,
and
that's so beautiful. I say it's beautiful, but it kind of is. It's kind of is. I like it.
So Carl, we teased Ryan a little bit about his printout being 3 foot long. And how long is yours?
Well, I cut them up and just, each section has its own printout.
Okay.
So I mean, if I put them all together, yeah, it probably I don't know, 20 feet long.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah, there's like I said, it's about it's in a folder. I remember putting it in a folder, and the folder is at least 3/4 inch thick with all the printouts in there.
Carl, your homework is to go find that, because those things fade.
Yes, I know. I do know that, and that's what I'm worried about.
That's like a jinx, David. That is like a jinx if I've ever heard one.
But not yours. Not yours, Carl.
Okay, Adam, what is the jinx? That it fades or that he finds it?
I'm not going to say. So we are down to 10 minutes, David. Why don't you tell us what we need to talk about still for the next 10 minutes or so?
Oh, okay. Well, let me just double check the calendar, triple check the calendar here, because me and calendars. I believe
23rd.
That sounds correct. There it is. Oh no, the 16th, second Sunday.
Oh, that makes sense. That's when my sci-fi club is.
Yeah, second Sunday.
Yeah.
We did the third Sunday last month because of Edgar's go-karting.
Right. I just kind of got the third Sunday in my head there, so that's why I went to 23.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little close, but I like the second Sunday. There's a little bit more of a gap.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's it. That's going to be at 2:00 next on October 16th.
Eastern time.
Eastern time. Yes. 1:00.
Chicago time.
Whatever the one is to the right of me,
Central,
and whatever,
Central time.
2:00 the next one, and 11 a.m. in Tim Swenson land. I think
really early.
Yeah, right.
And just give it in Zulu time, and we can add the necessary.
There we go.
I think we should start doing it by Mountain Time or Albuquerque time, since there's more members here in Albuquerque. What do you say?
Right. There's a critical mass.
I was hoping, hey, Carl, at the end of the last meeting, we talked about the AROS cartridges, and maybe, I don't know if you have any time, but do you think you could look into how to put a basic cartridge, even like a 10-line program onto an AROS binary?
Yeah, I can look into it. That's
I would like to learn how to do that, and I can't really find anything about how to do it.
Right.
I see how it's, if you have it already, how the AROS is set up. I can see you put in the byte here. It says it's a basic program. Well, okay.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it has to deal with, you got to copy the variables over. You got to tell it where the basic, what do they call them? Where the code is for the basic lines.
You have to move the basic program to start at 32 something or other. I don't remember the exact number.
Is it in the third
Where
party?
do you get this information, David? How do you know that?
Yeah, is it in the
How I
third
get this
party?
information? Because I memorize it.
Well, it has to. The basic has to start in chunk 4.
Yep.
Plus 8 byte.
Yep.
6 or
that's
8
right.
bytes for the header.
Yep.
Okay.
So you have to somehow move your program, your basic program, to that space, right? And Bill Jones, who did the Update magazine for a bit, he wrote an article about this and a little bit of code that he got from Tom Woods. I don't remember if you guys remember when Tom Woods was on with us a few meetings back. so Tom Woods did a lot of work on this. Bob Orfeld did a lot of work on this, and Bill wrote this basic program that would set your 2068 up so that when you loaded in the program you wanted to turn into a cartridge, it would load it into the right slot in memory. But then you were also expected to have, an EPROM burner hooked up to your 2068, and you burn it from there. And frankly, I just want to figure out how to move a program to the right place and create a binary from it, which is the same thing that Jeff has been talking about.
Well, there's a system variable that specifies where BASIC starts. And I think that if you set that prior to loading a program, it'll load it where you want it.
Well,
David,
yes.
I think you just set this system variable.
Address of basic programs.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll look into that. And Carl will look into it too.
Yeah. And the other thing is,
David.
is when you have to look into RAM and, copy is it text? Do you copy the text of your program, or is it
it's the program itself. You just load the program to that right spot.
Yeah, it's tokenized BASIC.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. That's what I was looking at. The
Okay.
tokenized BASIC hex code. You have to put that to that address. Because I didn't know because there's something I think in the AROS that you can specify some variable information. Right?
No.
Towards the end.
All your variables have to be defined using let statements. There's no variable storage in.
If you're using any machine code, that has to be specified in the AROS header. But if it's pure BASIC, then you don't need to worry about it.
Okay, because I know there was, I think, later ones where you can reserve memory or something like that. There's some AROS, how much memory you want to reserve.
That's only for machine code variables.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all in the technical manual,
Yep.
Yeah. Or in the third-party software guide.
page 106 to 112 in my version of the technical manual.
Okay. I've read the
Tim
technical
H,
manual.
Can I make a recommendation for your upgrade to your 2040 printer? I wanted to be able to plug into David's head and then just print out from there, and then we'll be good. We'll have everything he's talking about. We'll have it.
Well, all of this stuff is going to get dumped into my book about the 2068.
But on that, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say on that front, I could tweak Z makebase to spit this out and whatever, because it's just a tokenizer. It could put it, it could create a binary on whatever the right format is. I mean, it does a P file at the moment, but it could do anything.
So basically, what you're saying is you could type a basic program in like a text file, run it through ZMakeBase, and it'll give you the tokenized information, right? That you could load into a cartridge.
Yep.
Okay, I got you.
Well, you go, Tim. You go.
Okay.
Well, at least that way you wouldn't have to write it on the hardware itself, right? You could use whatever machine that you wanted to,
Right.
which is to be a little bit more convenient.
So yeah, Tim, if you can do that, that would be fantastic, and that might get us a long way towards it.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 2 minutes. Any last minute business? Anyone want to talk about something next time for food for thought?
Yeah. Anything we got?
Well, on our last meeting, we had talked about mini ports and the joystick port on the 2068, and I wasn't quite satisfied with the answers I was hearing. So I dug through the technical manuals and I shipped it off to David. So he's got the schematics on that to show that I can't remember if it was the left or the right MIDI or joystick port was actually a MIDI interface as well. And so
Really?
Andy, yeah, I looked at what you sent me, which was mostly the schematic, right?
Right.
And there was and I
think Timex's idea was they're going to make a MIDI control box that would plug into the 2068. And if memory serves me correctly, I think it might have, I really can't remember whether it's the left port or the right port, but it was one of those two.
Yeah.
And that way you can input MIDI and then output your sound variables out to the back slot.
Is there any software in the ROM that's already built in to do that, or you'd have to load some kind of program?
It would have to be
That
a
I don't
bit.
know.
You'd have to be bit banging it. because
Yeah, but it shows it on the schematics that the joysticks have MIDI ports.
joysticks have MIDI ports. I'm gonna go to this. I've got this.
Joysticks have MIDI
I should
ports.
say lines, MIDI lines.
I'm gonna go there now. I'm gonna
start controlling Qbert with my keyboard and see what happens.
There you go. Well, it only responds to certain ones. Only responds to sequential profits.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schematic right now, and
this is off the AY, right?
Yeah. I don't see how you can output anything from the joystick.
Well,
and it's not an output; it's an input.
Oh, MIDI input. Oh, okay.
Let me just share my screen. Here we go.
Because I did a bit of work with MIDI. It's like a current loop, and it's about 31 kilobits serial.
31250. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So can you make this out, Andy? Can you see what it is that we're looking? I don't think I can make it any bigger. Oh, maybe
did he send you the schematics for this MIDI box?
No.
Oh,
no, I didn't
okay.
send that. No, I sent the focused schematics for the control the joystick ports.
Yeah, because to me that's just a 8-bit I/O port.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to it.
Yeah, I actually circled it for you, David.
Yeah, I'd have to go digging through my email.
Yeah, I mean you can output a high on any of those bits, but to get a low, you'd have to have a pull down resistor.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me go look in my email and see if I can. I'm gonna stop sharing here. You don't need to.
It's curious that IO5 port bit 5 goes out to the bus. Huh, I wonder what that was going to be used for.
That's part of the bank switching nonsense.
Yes.
Okay.
It is. Yes.
I hate to be so hard on Timex for the completely nonsensical bank switching method that they used, but
you're not wrong.
I think that could have been by design because they're thinking about bringing out the Timex Sinclair 3000 the following year.
Let's see here.
Yeah, but I mean, if it was by design, it shares a lot of the same characteristics as a nuclear weapon.
No. You're supposed to say IBM because they sell you something that doesn't work, and then you have to buy these mods.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said nuclear, Jeff, so there's going to be somebody knocking at your door in the next couple of hours.
I was going to say that, but I was like, nah, I don't need to say that.
Only if you brought a Z88 onto base.
Well, I guess that's about everything. We've covered, I think, everything we're going to do today, right?
Yeah, we covered a lot.
Yeah. It was a good talk.
Andy, I'm gonna dig through my email and find that thing you sent me and forward it to the list. And
okay.
We'll definitely talk about this.
And Carl, you're gonna have everything worked out for the basic cartridge next time, right? And
Absolutely.
Tim, you're gonna have it worked out too, right? You're gonna have that CMake basic worked out. Hey, expect this to be done.
Yeah,
Right,
but seriously, it would be nice to get this cartridge thing kind of put to bed. How we can make cartridges of our own and make it easier. That would be nice.
Yeah. And then we can burn Ryan's program to a cartridge.
Exactly.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, but you better burn it to an EPROM because they keep updating.
Yeah, well, double EPROM. All right, gentlemen. Thank you for another fun evening. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.